God is moving in Africa. In a continent most known for disease, corruption, and poverty, the church is bringing change and filling the air with worship. Every Home for Christ Zambia is working to bring the gospel to every home and to disciple and train believers in this region. The Gwembe Valley in south-central Zambia typifies the problems which have been inherited from the past, which are pervasive throughout all of Zambia. The dusty valley floor is the home for thousands of Tonga people, most of which live on less than the equivalent of $1 a day. 1 in every 6 residents has HIV, and nearly half of the deaths in the Gwembe Valley are a result of malaria. Despite the problems that are pervasive in the Gwembe Valley, today we are seeing a spiritual revival flood the area. 10 years ago, God gave Dick Eastman, the president of Every Home for Christ, a vision of smoke rising from thousands of village huts in the valley. In the vision, each of these villages represented a center of worship and a place where God's glory resides. At the time of this vision, the Gwembe Valley was unreached with the gospel. Now, 10 years later, we are seeing the fulfillment of this vision. In August 2010, we celebrated the 10-year anniversary of Every Home for Christ's work in the Gwembe Valley. Attending were over 1,000 believers who gathered under the shade of a makeshift canopy to rejoice and celebrate what God is doing. From early in the morning until late at night, the joyful songs and rhythmic dances filled the dusty valley. Believers walked for days and slept under trees and in small schoolyard rooms in order to gather together to worship God. Indigenous leaders encouraged the spiritually hungry crowd, which consisted of young and old alike. The theme of the celebration was Grace to Gather and Preserve the Harvest. This theme exemplifies the heart and vision of Every Home for Christ Zambia. By the grace of God, pioneer missionaries began taking the gospel hut to hut in the Gwembe Valley 10 years ago. Walking the dusty paths, these pioneer missionaries were able to communicate the gospel to local Tonga people using picture charts and other evangelism tools. In time, the harvest grew. Eventually, a denomination was birthed by local Every Home for Christ leadership called Harvest for Christ, which serves to disciple local rural believers. Today, there are 600 churches in the valley and tens of thousands of believers scattered across the valley. In addition to the tremendous harvest in the Gwembe Valley through Every Home for Christ Zambia, a new multi-purpose clinic is being constructed which will serve the local population. This clinic, which exists to teach the local people about how to prevent diseases such as malaria and HIV, will act as a small hospital and will also serve as a meeting place to train local ministers. EHC Zambia also will be engaging in various other development projects which will benefit the local community. After 10 years, the valley is seeing new life birthed within it. Much of the Tonga people have heard the gospel, and many have received Jesus Christ as a result. A new hope is seen in their faces and heard in the worshipful songs. In what once was a spiritually barren land, repetitive and rhythmic songs of "Come and see what the Lord has done" fill the air. Worship arises to God's throne from an obscure valley in southern Zambia, just as Dick Eastman's vision alluded to 10 years ago. Today, all across Zambia is the worship of believers who have heard the gospel as a result of Every Home for Christ's home-to-home campaigns. Working in conjunction with local churches, Every Home for Christ's pioneer missionaries are taking the gospel to the darkest and the hardest to reach places in Zambia. And as a result, we are seeing the miracle of a growing harvest of souls as God's glory is filling the earth. Every Home for Christ has been working in Zambia for over 42 years and have distributed over 7 million gospel booklets, resulting in over 500,000 responses for Christ.